All right, everybody. Good to see you again, and welcome to Geopolitics Breaking News here. What's going on, Elizabeth?
Well, David, there is chaos in the Black Sea, and you wrote a book about this. So I am very interested to do a deep dive on what's going on with Russia and NATO and Ukraine and some of the neighboring countries.
And Poland, and
And
Lithuania,
Poland
and
and Lithuania.
Belarus. Well, indeed, there is chaos going on. And what do we mean by this? We mean that the clashes that are taking place right now in the Donbass area between Ukrainian forces and the Russian individuals living in Donbass. Those are who wants to be affiliated with Russia. So while this is taking place, at the same time, the United States is holding talks with Russia. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, was holding talks, I think, that was just a couple of days ago, with the Russian assistant to President Vladimir Putin for international affairs, Yuri Oshakov. They were talking,
Right.
and guess what? The third element to this chaos is that the three neighboring countries, Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania, are holding talks.
Right.
So
That really is chaos.
it
That
is
is so many different directions at once in the same situation.
it is indeed. Well, we all know what's taking place. What is the reason for all this? Well, of course, NATO's been pushing too hard. And now there are talks that, not talks rather, I just find out that Lithuania is sort of supporting the Ukrainians by providing some weapons. Even the Israelis are providing some weapons now to Ukraine. So that makes you question, because most of, as we know, Israeli weapons usually, most of it, if not all of it, is from the United States.
Right.
So, and that makes it very, very tense as far as how this is moving. Well, of course, Russia has requested, as I remember, I tweeted on this a couple of days ago, when Russia provided the 8 key points for the West to reconsider if they want to reduce the tensions. And one of them has to do with the assurances that Russia wants to have, assurances from the West, from NATO, in writing, shall we say. And why is that important? Because Russia doesn't trust the West.
Well,
doesn't trust
that's not
NATO.
surprising.
Yeah. Well, also because NATO has expanded eastward, even though we promised right after the fall of the Soviet Union that we will not do so. And we end up doing that. So, and the reason why I'm a little bit familiar with this stuff, because as you mentioned earlier, I wrote a book about Russia. So I had to dig deeper in understanding what's going on with all this. So there are, of course, if I may just elaborate a little bit more for our viewers, so
Please.
they can have an understanding. There have been an assertion in the West that many observers have been saying which they find it convenient, of course, to say that Vladimir Putin is aiming at reinstating the Soviet Union glory days with Russia at its center. Well, of course, that's nonsense.
Right.
It's nonsense. Why is that? It's nonsense because it obscures these statements by Western observers, obscure the wide variety, for example, that the Russians, the instruments that Russians have at their disposal to influence or exert influence in the region and potentially beyond if they want to. So, and that is where I don't see the arguments of the West. Doesn't make sense. Russia is unlikely to reconstitute the USSR anytime soon. Okay?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because it's just the priorities are different. So where the concern is that Russia, under Putin, of course, they have many tools at their disposal to influence. And guess what? To influence the political, to influence the economic, to influence the social, and also foreign policy trajectory of its neighbors, even if it will not be able to rebuild the sort of called the Russian state, or whatever you want to call it. And what does it mean on all this? That Russia has more tools in its toolbox to do whatever. The best example that I can share with our viewers here, it has to do with the conflict with Georgia. I don't know if some of you will remember this or not. A couple of years ago, and at that time was Mikhail Saakashvili was the head of the president. And by the way, Mikhail Saakashvili was educated here in the West.
Wow.
So, yeah. So it was the West that put him in that part of that put him into the presidency to push for the West policies. And Georgia miscalculated. Why? Because they did not understand that Russia has other tools besides just whatever.
Right.
And that's what happened. So he ended up taking Russia 3 days, run over the Georgian military. That's how fast Russia can do it. So
that's not very long. 3 days is very, very quick.
And that in itself sent a message to the West that, you're going to have to think twice about getting closer to Russia's doorstep. So, and this is why you're going to have to think, you as an analyst, you as a geopolitical observer, you as a citizen, whatever, you have to think in terms of, given Russia's present and maybe upcoming military hardware or advances. Remember, they just did the test of that supersonic missile?
Right.
Given that, it behooves the West, the United States included for that matter, to think in terms of getting a systematic understanding of Russia's goals and aspiration while preventing any conflict with Moscow from erupting.
I have this as something I would like to put to you and to really do a deep dive for our viewers. And that is, a lot of this is happening because we're watching these tensions escalate, specifically over Ukraine. And who is really driving that escalation, in your opinion? Is it Moscow? Is it the Russians? Or is it NATO and the US that's really pushing for this? And what role do you see Ukraine itself playing here? Because I know that they have, at least in talks, some kind of conversation about joining NATO sometime, maybe.
Well, it makes me laugh when I hear that.
Yeah. And I know there's no time frame on it, and it's a sort of it seems very much like lip service, but that was one of the things that was addressed during the last few days is, Ukraine absolutely cannot become part of NATO. Well, I don't know how reasonable that is or not, but I'd love your take on it.
Well, they can't. The short answer is they can't, for one reason and one reason only. Ukraine's military capability do not meet the standards of NATO.
Sure.
That's what's the word I'm looking for? That's non-negotiable. Okay. They have to upgrade their military to a certain level to meet standards. As to your first part of the question, who's behind this? Well, of course we know who's behind it. It's NATO and the US. Well, when you say NATO, usually you say the US.
Right.
But why is NATO? It's because NATO now, as of today, is irrelevant. So getting into a conflict like this puts it at the front. Okay? Yep. And now it becomes like the question of the day, what is NATO doing about Ukraine?
And it is. And every single time I hear this, I think, what is this for?
What is it for? It's the survival of the alliance that is becoming more and more irrelevant. They have to, as I always say, they have to create a real or perceived enemy to justify their presence. Remember, just only a few months ago, who was the enemy? It was China.
Right.
And and they even used the term that China is expanding near NATO's borders. Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's laughable. So, and this is where my big concern that the West might find it very challenging to anticipate where the next conflict with Russia will emerge. Because here is the thing: the wrong decision or the right one made it too late could
Yep.
have dire consequences. So.
And very, very dire consequences. I mean, my observation is the same one, is that, NATO, and this is happening all over, not just the US, but all over the world, where they're creating these perceived need for war to, to keep the military industrial complex globally, and everything, everything along with that, alive. Because I think for the most part, people don't want war. I mean, is that your observation also?
Well, mostly, yeah. Who wants war? I mean, literally, for us, every citizen, do we want any? No, we don't want any of that. You got some, not all, but some politicians, they understand the ramification of this. But those politicians are being controlled by special interest groups behind the scenes, who manages which directions those conflicts go, whatever. I mean, they don't care for human life. If that it's lost, so what? As long as they make money, because the driving motives for them is greed. That's what it is,
Right.
And they don't understand the seriousness of ramifications for something like what we are witnessing right now on the borders with Ukraine,
Right.
And becomes the question, because based on what I'm reading, and I did some reading this morning, that's my academic background. I have to keep up with what's going on. Based on what I found was that Russia made it clear to the West that here are the 8 points that we want your response on it ASAP.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're gonna be deploying nuclear weapons to Belarus.
Which is a pretty big threat. You don't think they'll fulfill on that, do you?
Oh, they will.
Really?
Oh, they will. The Russians will move forward. Oh, yes, they will move forward, because that was the same argument. Here's the same argument. And I tend to use history as my guide when it comes down to geopolitics, because that was the same argument was made in the case of Georgia, when the West was pushing Georgia to that. Yeah, we'll come to your aid. Well, guess what?
When the
first shot was fired, the West said, no, you got to be crazy to go against nuclear Russia. That's what Ukraine doesn't understand right now. And to put it back, as you said it earlier, they are getting lip service from NATO. And they have to be very, very careful. The other aspect to all this, which is hidden, it has to do with the rivalry between the US and Russia. That is an important factor. Even though, here is the thing, this rivalry today differed markedly from what it was back a few decades ago.
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of the Bond villains, a lot of the villains that we had here for many, many years were always Russian. There were 2 acceptable villains for all movies, and they were either Russian or Chinese.
Yeah.
And now that's having to shift in terms of public opinion, because what beef do we really have with Russia right now?
None.
I mean, legitimately, what beef do we have with them?
No, we don't. It just, we don't like the fact that Russia is, because we have to create that enemy. That enemy has to always exist.
Right.
Yeah. What problem do we have with the Russians? None.
And that's what always, when you look at these things, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, and I'd love your opinion on this too. I feel similarly about Taiwan. Not that there aren't issues, because there absolutely are issues, and I want to make sure that that's heard also. But with Ukraine, what is really the issue? What is really the fundamental reason that this issue, these conflicts are even sort of happening with Ukraine? What is the fundamental issue there? Are there human rights abuses? Are there, military actions? Are there, is there a solid reason, or is it used for political gain somewhere else? Is it used for a perceived enemy or a military basically a military chess move.
Yeah, it is exactly. That's how truly that's how you described it. It's exactly right. It just you think about it in terms of a geopolitical interest. This has to do with securing access to certain regions. You know, the Black Sea is very crucial, but very crucial to Russians more so than it is to the West, because and I am a believer of this based on the amount of research that I conducted on this topic. Russia will go to a war over access to the Black Sea, because they're not going to allow the Black Sea to be, because that will be choking points for them. They're not going to allow it. That is why they went ahead and annexed Crimea, even though we all know historically Crimea belongs to Russia, and Russia, back when Nikita Khrushchev handed as a gift to Ukraine back then. Remember, Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union. Ukraine made a mistake back then when it gave up its nuclear weapons, because the West told Ukraine, just give up your nuclear weapons and we will protect you. You know, but again, I know. But again, this takes me back to the Georgia scenario. That was exactly what was said to Georgia. And the Georgian found out, Mikhail Saakashvili at the time found out, the moment that first shot was fired, NATO was not his rescue, because they knew, well, are you going to risk a nuclear war with Russia?
Yeah.
You know, and that's what Ukraine is about to find out. I want just to go back quickly to the point of rivalry between the US and Russia, because it's very important. You know, as I said earlier, those dynamics have changed. The tenet of it remained the same. You know, still the desire to maintain the ideological influence drives both Russia and the United States to highlight this intensity of their rivalry. And this is why you see it displayed in Ukraine crisis. You know, I believe personally, and this is my personal opinion, the Ukraine crisis demonstrates really that you can call the Cold War has ended. You know, the post-Cold War era, though the Cold War itself has never ended.
Yeah, I
It
think
has never.
that's a really important point.
Yeah, it has never ended. You know, its ending it's almost like an illusion in the West,
Right.
trying to justify the policies that we are seeing today towards Russia by inflating, excuse me, by inflating this idea of having been victorious. Oh, we won, we were, you know, but the Cold War has never ended.
Right.
Yeah, and Ukraine crisis puts an end to that thinking. You know why? Because when Russia marched and took over Crimea, that's it. That means Cold War has never ended.
Yeah.
So the crisis, I believe, in my opinion, the crisis demonstrated two key points or key factors or two key elements. You know, one is that Russia vehemently opposes the integration, its integration with the West, no matter what the cost.
Yeah.
And two, the Ukraine crisis is providing the perfect platform for Russia to cement its assertive foreign policy as a new era of intense geopolitical competition, strong rivalry, and even a possible confrontation becoming looming on the horizon between not only Moscow and Washington, but also between Moscow and Brussels.
So your best prediction, David, and I know, you know, there's always factors, but your best prediction, do you see the situation, especially now that there's sort of an open dialogue addressing the escalation happening here? Do you see it de-escalating, or do you see the escalation kind of continuing?
It's not de-escalating, just to make sure for our viewers to know. It is not de-escalating because the West did not respond yet to Russia's demand, the 8 points.
Yeah, and so that's my question to you. Do you think that the West is going to sort of try to de-escalate this situation, Or do you think they're going to keep pushing and escalate it even further?
They might try to push it a little notch just to see how far they can go. But the
Mhm.
moment Russia gives the orders to deploy the nuclear weapons to Belarus,
Yeah.
that's where the conversation is going to end. My fear is that I hope it's not too late by then.
I hope that too.
Yeah. And that's why Russia is telling the Americans, get back to us ASAP, not
Mhm.
next year, ASAP right away.
Yeah.
So it's because they're not going to remember in Crimea itself, there are about 2 million Russians there that live there. So
Oh wow. Yeah.
there's a lot. When I wrote the book about Russia, I detailed certain activities that took place in Ukraine through the funding from the State Department.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I found out.
Wow.
So it's the truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of funding that was funneled into the direction of Ukraine, and at the
Right.
same time, what do you expect? What do you expect? You, the West, you, NATO, you, the US, what do you expect? You are pushing your forces to the borders of Russia. What do you expect them to do?
Yeah.
I mean, just common sense. Think of it for us. Think of it for us here.
Oh, absolutely.
How are we going to feel if Russia or China, okay, move some of their naval assets to the Gulf of Florida or Gulf of Mexico?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be all over everywhere. It would be
Exactly.
absolute chaos here if that happened.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why I don't understand what makes what we do right and what they do wrong. You can't have two standards, two yardsticks by which to measure. We have one set of rules to treat this country and another set of rules to treat this country. Well, where is the standard in that?
Right.
That's what we call the double standard. You can't have that. And we are very famous for having our foreign policy. As one who works in Washington, D.C., I've been around the capital to understand the dynamics. When you conduct yourself that way,
Mhm.
you don't have the trust or the credibility to be talking from a position of strength.
Well, and we talk a lot about this, about the US hegemony in its decline. For better or worse, we're starting to see, with the internet and with the amount of information that's now possible, a lot
Yeah.
of people aren't getting their information from, the mass media. They're getting it from people like us, smaller but very well educated and very experientially heavy people who don't have the same biases. And so, looking at our foreign policy and, countries, corporations are all run by people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can map the same behavior that you would map onto a person onto countries or onto corporations because they're people. That's all it is just groups of people who have agreed that they're part of whatever this or whatever it is. And so if you were to look at a person behaving that way, if you were to look at a person who was, pushing boundaries all the time, saying one thing and doing another, that's not a trustworthy person. That's not somebody that you would keep in your life. And we say this obviously because we would
Mm-hmm.
love some change here. We would love for that policy to change. We would love for it to be more honest, more inclusive, not just foreign policy, but policy here in the United States for us.
Yeah. But that one, but in the foreign policy, it's a major sort of foundation on which a country can resonate or can sort of communicate its policies towards other countries. So if you lose that credibility on the global stage,
Yeah.
you're done. You're done, basically. I look at it like, for example, this morning, I just found out that two journalists in Egypt have been sentenced to prison.
Oh,
Why?
wow.
It's because they stated facts about the wrong policies of the government. What did we say about it? Nothing.
Well, with Julian Assange, I don't know that we can say anything about it.
Well, and that becomes very problematic. So where is the democracy into the, you can, that's again, this is where that double standards doesn't lend you the credibility you need to
Yeah.
move things forward.
Yeah.
You look at it like what we talked about last Friday about Secretary of State tour in Asia that was cut short. Why was cut short? Because there is no credibility. No
Right.
one wants to sit down with you and talk because they know that talk is just empty rhetoric, no more, no less. They don't
Well,
want to do that.
and I wonder if that's why, Russia understands that. The world understands that, right? This
Mhm.
is not, new information to anybody that
Exactly.
the US says one thing and does another.
Mhm.
And, the US isn't alone in doing this, but it is
No,
the biggest power currently that is doing it.
exactly.
So that's what makes it so visible.
Exactly. And this is why we are hoping with our channel.
Mhm.
I read some comments from some of our viewers. They said this is the channel now that they can get the information from because
Yeah.
it's unbiased, is based on facts to the best of our knowledge, and it's factual.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you said earlier, this is what people are looking for. And
Right.
the idea of why are we doing this? It's because we want to, it's our country. We care for our country. To those who think otherwise, they are mistaken. We are Americans after all, no matter what,
Mhm.
for the thick or the thin. So we're
Yeah.
still going to have to make sure we want to push towards the right path
Right.
for the sake of all of us all. That is the whole reason
Absolutely.
why we doing what we're doing, or the way we're doing it is because we want to promote peace, because that's very important. And if it takes for us to come online like this and express, providing clarifications to where the issues are in a
Mhm.
simple language that everybody can understand, then at least we did our parts. There are limits to what we can do.
Right.
But we are also concerned with this censorship. We are concerned. This is why we have locals now.
Yes. Check us out, geopolitics.locals.com. David and I are going to start posting, I think today or tomorrow, information that we can't give you guys here on this platform. So check us out at geopolitics.locals.com.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking on that platform. We're going to be detailing the information that, our viewers needs to know, because that's how it works.
Right.
The word gets out as far as, hey, this is how you need to understand the issue A or issue B, whatever. That's like one of our viewers said one time, and I do remember the comment. They said, well, I wish President Biden is watching your channel. You know what was my answer?
We wish that too.
You know what was my answer?
What?
They said they won't let him.
Yeah.
They won't let him watch.
Agreed.
They're not going to let him watch our channel. So,
well,
but
and honestly, it wouldn't matter anyway, because, he's not, and this is something that I think the American people, but globally, people need to understand, is it's not just President Biden.
No.
He has an entire team of people. He has corporate backers. There are lobbyists. I mean, there's people, there are very many more people involved in this, and he may be the least involved person. He's just the figurehead. So even when we talk about President Biden, we're not just talking about him. We're talking about the entire entourage, I guess.
Exactly.
Words.
Yeah. But at the same time, he's being held accountable. That's like, to me, that's how I look at it. We are being held accountable. That's why we have to fact check our information before we share it with our viewers. We have to make sure, and that's what we always say, to the best of our knowledge,
right?
Because that's usually the standard. And if we mess up, that's on us. We don't blame anyone else. It's us. But usually we are very, very thorough in our deliberation as far as information. But just to go back to the idea of locals, this is the reason why we have locals. So please, if you have not checked us out on locals, please do so by going to geopolitics.locals.com. So we're going to be posting stuff there. We're going to be having live conversations also there with our viewers and so forth. So we will be dealing with a lot of issues there that will be of great importance to everybody. And also we wanted to let our viewers, regarding our membership, to check us out on geopolitics.com. That's where we offer our membership.
geopoliticsinconflict.com.
Oh, what did I forget? Did I forget that? So geopoliticsinconflict.com. So, and speaking of membership there, we do have a next presentation, right?
Yes, we do.
For our members, that's we're going to be dealing with artificial intelligence.
It's a big topic.
Oh, yeah. There are some aspects to it from, medical to military to financial. It's incredible. Right. It's incredible.
Well, and what I'd like to what I want to tell our viewers about the AI conversation is that it's not just about AI. It is about, the uses of AI, because AI, I think, can be used for good, and I think it can be used for not good.
That's true. That is true. So, and also just to remind our viewers, for Wednesday, we're doing the Q&A. That's what we always do at 1100 hours. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Yeah, 11. And Friday, we are doing the live stream on Friday. Yes. And we'll post. And Thursday, I want to do anything because it's Christmas Day.
No, Saturday's Christmas.
Oh, it's Saturday.
Yeah.
I'm 2 days ahead.
That's okay.
Anyway, that's how excited I am about Christmas. Wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. So, well, good. Well, just to wrap this up quickly here, the understanding of these tensions, the ongoing tensions brewing on the Ukraine border, it's not going to be resolved till the U.S. comes back with an answer to Russia's 8 key points. That's going to determine which direction they're going to go. Russia, the Kremlin made it clear that they will move or deploy nuclear missiles to Belarus. And personally, that would not be a good thing.
Absolutely.
But they're going to do what they have to do. Survival will push you to do things that you never thought you will. So anything to add, Elizabeth, before we leave?
Absolutely.
No?
My laptop's about to die, so we got to wrap it up.
It works out. All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed this break in here and breaking news, that is, and updates. And as always, stay informed. Till next time, we look forward to seeing you. All right. Bye-bye.